very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Lesson 2 of our Cloud Integration and Data Management Summer School. So as I said, it's Lesson 2. The third one will be on August the 15th at around this time, so remember that. The curriculum as it stands, there we go. We've already done the first one, so you can go back and watch the replay. There'll be a link for that a bit later on. And the good news is, after you've done all 3 lessons of the summer school, it won't be a test. I'm not going to test you, but you'll be able to receive a small gift for a summer treat, keeping with our summer theme. So why are there 3 lessons in the series? Primarily, we're looking at 3 big challenges, and these challenges were large enough to dedicate a lesson each for each challenge. So as you said, it's the Salesforce Summer School. The first challenge we looked at last time about Salesforce becoming a data silo and how we can integrate data in and out. The second lesson today, we're going to talk about the data management aspects within Salesforce. And the third lesson, we're going to see how we can stop our users from corrupting all that data that we've worked so hard and so diligently to keep nice and clean and reconcile in the first 2 lessons. So today's lesson, as we said, the goal for you to understand the Salesforce data management challenges and techniques and some things you can do to sort those things out. The faculty for today is myself, Clive Behrman. I've got Stephen Mitchell. You're going to be our demo guy today. Hello, Steve.
Good day, everyone.
And I've also got Martin Lehman, who's from Cloud Perspective in the UK, and he's a real great expert on the data management within Salesforce. And I know he's got some great stuff to tell you. So good morning, or good evening now for you, Martin.
Thank you.
So the lesson plan, we're going to look at Salesforce data management challenges, how we can solve those with a single view. We'll see a nice demonstration. We'll get some best practice from Martin. For those of you that maybe have a bit more than just Salesforce as your center of the universe, maybe you're doing reporting out of other systems, not just Salesforce, we'll just have a quick swing at Universal MDM from Informatica, some Q&A, and I'm going to set you some homework. So let's get on with the lesson. So what's wrong with inconsistent and poorly managed data in Salesforce? Well, nothing really if you don't want a lasting relationship with your customer. I mean, let's just look here. You know, we're seeing the typical sort of data management challenges that result, as we see on number 4, with impacts to your business. So we start off at the top left. We create content. I've got a lead as an example there that creates the content. We can create those leads through marketing, actually making the lead themselves through manual data entry. Maybe there's some marketing activity that might make the lead. In this instance, it could be, I don't know, just like this webinar, you filled in a registration page on the web, and that created a lead in Salesforce. Or maybe there's some automated activity. You're going to use an upsert from a different system that feeds data into Salesforce. And of course, when you do that, you're going to end up with rampant duplication, because all of those 3 things could happen at the same time. And if that's not bad enough, perhaps the records that we're uploading and creating, the data's invalid, perhaps the data's inaccurate. So I've got actual data in the field, but things like phone numbers might be inaccurate, or it just might be incomplete. You know, I've got the phone number, but I don't have the zip code or postal code. And if that's not bad enough, I don't just use one instance of Salesforce. Typically, I maybe have a staging instance, but many times Salesforce just kind of sprawls because one division or maybe one company located in different regions, they sign up for Salesforce. Maybe maybe it's a U.S. subsidiary signs up for Salesforce, and then your EMEA, your European sub, they have an instance of Salesforce too. So you end up with multiple instances. There's different definitions about the data between maybe those instances. Maybe some have custom fields that others don't. And even in that example, right, I just mentioned whereby the zip code in the U.S. is called zip, and in the U.K. it's called postal. So, and perhaps you've also got some inconsistent processes with how you deal with the data in those different organizations. And of course, that leads on to number 4, which really is, well, how does all of this poor data management impact the business? That means we're going to get inaccurate forecasts, loss of productivity. Say my salespeople are now creating duplicate data, or they can't find the data that they want in order to progress opportunities along. And the sort of flip side of that is adoption. People sort of say, well, I'm not going to bother really using Salesforce, or I'll just put the bare minimum in because the data's junk anyway, and I can't get around it. So what we're suggesting is you use this single view. We create a single view so we can see just exactly what's happening with a particular customer or prospect. In our case, we'll see that in the accounts today. We'll see kind of a consolidated view of just exactly all the activity inside Salesforce that's going on with that particular customer. So there's 3 areas we'll focus on to deliver that single customer view. The first thing, as we said, is data quality, and I know Martin is going to do a great presentation on this, which means we're going to get accurate data. We're going to make sure it's complete. So if I need to fill in all the fields, they'll all be completed. We don't want to have duplicates in that data quality, and we want to make sure that that data is valid. So if I've got a phone number or if I've got an email address, it's not just well, I don't just have the data, but it's in the right format too. Along with data quality, we're going to look at data consolidation. As we said, what does that mean across different types of instances? Have an understanding about field standardization. Will that sort of create that golden master? So the person, Clive B, is the same person as Clive Behrman, or in fact Behrman, C. That we all know that there's going to be one golden master that can synchronize that data to those other records. We're going to look at touch a little bit on making sure we can consolidate across multiple Salesforce orgs and, of course, across multiple geographies. And the last thing is data visualization. Perhaps when we look at the account record and we see all the sort of activity that's happening to that account, perhaps we want to slice and dice and have a look at it in a different way. So perhaps not just this, I'm doing air quotes here, standard view that Salesforce gives you, but is there a slice of legal entities? Is there a geographical slice I can look at? So this that's called hierarchy management, and we'll look at how hierarchies can help with that single view of the customer. So the tool we're going to use for that is Informatica Cloud MDM, and it follows this similar sort of life cycle of cleansing, enriching, consolidating, and relating the data. And we've got some very nice features that we'll see in demo that goes along with that. So dedupe, point of entry to secure dedupes. We'll see some fuzzy matching so we can find out exactly just the records that we want. As part of the demo, we'll see some field standardization on the enrichment side and third-party data augmentation. We'll see that gold master and the sort of merging of accounts and how that works. And finally, that customer view, we're going to see the results of that in that being able to relate to just exactly what the customer interaction has been so far. So there, now you'll see that cycle of cleanse, enrich, consolidate, and relate. You know, we're going to follow through with that content is created. It's going to be enriched after we've established uniqueness. Data is going to be validated. We're going to ensure it's complete. We're going to consolidate various pieces, build that single view, construct that hierarchy, and then we're really going to use the view to increase revenue, improve cross-sell, upsell. We'll have a better idea about what the customer's done, so we'll have with better customer service. And because we've got a nice picture of the activity, you know, any decisions that we make with how we're going to use that customer will reduce the business risk for us. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Steve. So please place forward for the demonstration. We're going to see some of these points: standardization, dedupe, securing the point of entry, consolidation, and hierarchies. So Steve, if you're ready, I'm just going to pass it over to you and take it away.
So thanks very much. I hope everyone can see my screen. One of the first things that many people don't realize about you know, going on that journey to better data quality and achieving that single view is it's not just a single one-click process. It's actually an iterative process that you go through where you start out, you identify certain parameters that you want to fix and correct, and you basically execute on that, and then you start again. And you continually actually tweak the cleansing methodology that you have until you arrive at your final result. Now, we're specifically going to be looking at this from the angle of a marketing organization that is actually trying to gain some insight into the data on their existing customers. So I've got some dashboards up here that reveal different statistics about this organization. We actually sell different types of kitchen appliances and white goods to large chains across the globe. We're trying to work out where do we have the most penetration with some of our products and who's actually signed up to different types of service contract agreements. Now, looking at these dashboards, the first thing you'll notice is there are some inconsistencies. The first one being, on a basic level, things like geographic regions are not actually being standardized. Okay, so we've got different ways that different people in the organization have entered in things like the USA. Some people have put United States of America. Looking in Europe, we've got things like Deutschland, which is the German word for Germany. And we need to really standardize all these fields so that we know that when we build all these different types of reports, at least on a basic level, we're all talking about the same thing. So when we actually go about solving this problem is we provide you an ability to actually use the data dictionary, and that dictionary will distill that collection of associated words down into a standardized field. So I'm actually going to run this in the background. So this process that we go through is really just breaking down the automated functionality that you would never really see in Cloud MDM in the background. And while that runs, we can quickly jump into our accounts and we can see all the different various, let's just refresh that. And actually, let's just quickly change this view. And we're going to add in those country fields. So add in our billing country, and we'll also add in the ISO code. And after that standardization is completed, what you'll see now is we've actually converted a lot of those different abbreviations, things like Germany have actually been, or Deutschland have been changed into Germany, and we've also extracted an ISO code. So it's a nice way to really first group your data down by region. Now, the effect that will have on our dashboards is pretty immediate. We now actually see all of the variations being consolidated down into single groupings. So no longer do we have multiple regions where we have fries being sold. We actually just have a single region of the US. And the same thing has actually taken place across our service contracts in the rest of the globe. Okay, so we've solved that problem. The next angle that we need to take on is, okay, so we're now all talking about the same thing, and we have consistent information across all our different account records. If we start looking at this account list, we'll notice something else. There's a lot of duplicates running through here. So we've got things like Little Chef, who are a chain in the United Kingdom. We've got them with their limited legal entity and then their LTD, abbreviation legal entity, which is what we call noise words, with several variations of things like McDonald's. So we're now ready to start digging in and working out what's a duplicate and what isn't. If I actually looked at Carl Jr.'s and Carl Jr.'s Incorporated, and we open these two accounts, we can see just by looking at the various fields, and if I was just eyeballing this as a person who'd been tasked with deduplicating everything on my own, I would actually go through and say, well, you know what? It's got the same domain, the phone number was the same, the zip code and the city and the country are the same, slightly different address, maybe just a different small sales office, but I'd like to actually merge and group these two together. Now, if I was going to do that on my own, it's going to take me, a good few months to get through this process, and it's all down to my own judgment. What I'd rather do is come up with a very, very consistent way that I can run this across all my data in Salesforce. And the first way we start doing this is by going into our Fuzzy Matching Studio. Now, the Fuzzy Matching Studio is not something soft and furry and fluffy that we can hug when we go to bed at night. It's actually using fuzzy logic matching of actual string and field data. So what we would do is, if you as a person were to look at two columns of rows, and you see the name Steve, you see Steven, you see Steve with a PH, you instinctively know that those names are actually similar and they could actually be the same person. And we're going to do this now with Carl Jr.'s and Carl's Jr. Inc. Let's just bring up that account. And we're going to run this comparison. Now, the comparison that we have right now is specifically set up for account objects. The strength of this is that I can now be in a scenario where I can have specific matches that are specifically made for certain types of entities and objects. This means that across the rest of my metadata, I don't have to have the same matching. So where an account, you may be saying something like a tax number should always be 100% match. For people, you can be a little bit more flexible in your different matching algorithms. Now, looking at these two objects, Carl Jr.'s and Carl Jr.'s Incorporated, we first look at a normalized instance of the company name. So what that means is we remove any special characters, we take out any spaces, we also remove things that we call noise words. So noise word is an abbreviation or a legal entity. So places like Germany would have GmbH on the end, Sweden they would have SA dots, in the US you could have incorporated or something very, very similar. And then what we do is we say to ourselves, well, this matching there was a 91 out of 100 matching. What we'd like to do is we'd like to give this a weighted score. So I want to weight this 91 out of 100 score as a 75% rating in the overall maximum score, and then get a weighted score. We then do this for each field going down, and we end a total score of 100.8 out of a maximum score of 120. Now, after we've gotten these two scores, what we then do is we look at two thresholds. The first threshold is a matching threshold. And all the matching threshold does is it groups these different objects together, it puts its arm around those items and says, these guys are pretty similar, we're going to hold them in a bucket for you, and when you're ready you can have a look and you can decide which one of those you want to merge or which ones do you want to actually exclude as duplicates. The other threshold, the duplicate threshold, is far more active. Whereas when you're matching and you're just identifying groups of duplicates, when you look at the duplicate threshold, what you're actually doing is you're saying, if the score goes over this threshold, I would like to automatically dedupe and merge these objects together because I'm 100% sure they are the same. So one of them is very active, and the other one is passive and gives your staff an ability to make a decision on what needs to be taken place. Now, we're going to actually do both. So I'm first going to go into the Carl Jr.'s account, and currently there are no duplicates identified. Okay, so we'll first run the fuzzy logic match on all of our duplicates, and that'll just run in the background. Okay, great. So it's actually gone and it's found the various duplicates. Now, every single account or every single object gets something called a bean created in the background. Really, all that bean is it's a shadow copy of the most important fields inside your objects in Salesforce.com. Those beans that get grouped together, and a single one of those objects will be deemed the master bean. The idea is that when you merge everything together, all the various fields that are important to you from those different beans can be merged into that master bean, and then the actual beans exist in the background in a shadow copy, and then we actually remove any of the duplicates. So the idea is that you can undo any of those merges that you may do. Now, I could just manually merge these two fields together and just go through the standard merge process in Salesforce.com, but instead what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do an active merge of all those objects. So what I should actually see is from all these different accounts that I have in here, of about 39 of them, we're going to see all of them merged down to around 24 different accounts. So let's actually execute that and run that merge of accounts. And now what I can do is I can actually just see this taking place. So we'll see this number drop. So it's already gone down from 39 to 27, and it's already down to 24, which is pretty much what we usually see when we run these dedupes. So now what's happened is I've got this Carl Jr.'s account, and I have a second Carl Jr.'s account here as well. Now one of these it will be deemed as the actual master record. So let's just quickly refresh this one and see if, okay, so that one's gone. So if we go back to our accounts and we open up that Carl Jr.'s Incorporated, what's happened is all those duplicates have now vanished. But we're going to come back to what actually happened to that other Carl Jr.'s account in a moment. The other effect we're going to see, all our dashboards are now going to be showing the reality of our business. Whereas before we had multiple duplicates, it was making us feel pretty good because we're looking at vanity metrics in terms of quantities of customers. We're now back to a more realistic view of what's actually taking place inside our business and our CRM, which is where you really need to be if you're trying to make calls on these dashboards on business strategy and where you need to be focusing. Now, we've successfully completed that. The other side of the conundrum that we need to solve is we still have a lot of data in the rest of our business. So far, we've only deduped and identified and standardized information that's currently existing inside our Salesforce instance. We still have a lot of information in the rest of our business that we would like to augment into these accounts so we can actually get a more full picture of what's going on. So if many of you run financial systems or service management systems like BMC Remedy, maybe you're using SAP Financials, and you know that SAP Financials, without a doubt, is always going to be the financial truth within your organization, then you definitely want to be able to say anything that comes from SAP, I want to always overrule any other piece of data inside my Salesforce system. So let's have a look at how we can actually do that now so we start to get a full picture of everything that's going on in the organization. Now, with all these different accounts that I have, if I drill down into, we'll use Carl Jr. since we're here, we've got two sections of information that we haven't actually seen be updated yet: financial information and service level information. Now, this data does actually exist, and we're able to actually see this information and where it is by looking at our consolidated view. Okay. Now, in the consolidated view, what you also see is we still have that old account is available. So what we do when we open up the consolidated view is we're looking at all the different objects that are described as beans throughout our system, and we're trying to work out which ones are related and how could we actually merge that data or consolidate it is the term we use, into that single master record. Now I'm just going to find another one of our accounts that should have a better example of data that's coming from external systems. So we'll have a look at Wendy Sundays. Okay, great, it's come through. I've actually had all the financial information from my SAP sources, and I've had my BNC remedy data also consolidated now into the single records. So we've now gone through the standardization, we've done the deduplication, and we've also performed the consolidation of all of this information. So now this is going to have a marked effect on what happens, because now we're not just looking at what's taking place inside Salesforce.com, we're actually considering all the other sources of information within your business. And straight away, you can see what we weren't actually focusing on the entire time within our CRM. So we now have a very, very, very coherent view of different products and their markets, where they're actually sold. We can see where things like our service contracts are existing, because we're now feeding in data and we're deduping that data from things like BMC Remedy. And more importantly, what we're also able to do is now we can now do roll-ups, because since we're feeding that information from our financial systems, we can now trust this actual data, because we know we're not going to be counting any of these different accounts twice.
I just got a quick question, and then just to be clear, we're not actually touching the data in Remedy, right? This is now all been imported into Salesforce and consolidated inside Salesforce, right? So you're pulling from Remedy and SAP.
That's correct. So if you were, for instance, pulling into Remedy and that Remedy data was perhaps identified as a duplicate, what would happen is it would still be linked to the master record. So you would just continue to be pushing in data from Remedy to the same bean, and that bean would just continue to update the master record. So you'd always be looking at that latest copy of data from Remedy without actually affecting anything.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Now, the final two things that we need to do is we've now got to a point where we have actually cleaned a lot of the existing data that we had, but we'd also like to be able to create a hierarchy of all this different information. So one final thing that we can do is we can build up different types of hierarchy views of the different types of objects we have. So beyond just deduping and ensuring the quality of the data and consolidating it, what we can also do is we can build a relationship inside our data. So we can say a company like McDonald's, for instance, is actually related to several accounts. So there's a relationship across all of the U.S. and across the world in different regions, and we can build a legal hierarchy of those different objects. So this doesn't always have to be a legal hierarchy. I mean, we've used Dunn's numbers to actually create this, but you can come up with your own sales hierarchy for perhaps for regions or pretty much anything else that you can come up with. Now, we've now done all of our housekeeping, and we've done our homework that we should have been doing all this time with working with this data. What we now need to do is we need to ensure how can we prevent this problem from coming up again, and how can we actually stop our users from creating a bigger problem in the future. Now, the way we do it is we use point of entry protection. So point of entry protection is really just a nice way to say, let's do real-time deduplication, okay, as a user is working with your Salesforce instance. So if I, for instance, now said, well, let's try and build another Carl's Jr., okay, and we'll say the country has to be in the United States. I don't think we have them here in the UK yet. And we try and actually create that account. And what happens is instantly we do the fuzzy logic match across all of the data inside our org, and we then get a list of the various entities that match that name for an account. So straight away we can actually see our old duplicate account, and we can also see the master account, but we can also see things like leads that may be related, and anywhere else, our other systems that could also have the same information. And we can then prevent our users from either creating an account, we could switch this off, or finally we could just say, hey, let's ignore it and keep going. And that effectively concludes our lesson for today.
Great demo. Thanks very much. Now, let's hear about it in practice. Martin, take it away.
What I want to talk about now is what we found in terms of best practice in actually implementing this with real-life customers. And I've got a presentation here where we'll talk a little bit about ourselves, but hopefully towards the end of the presentation we'll tell you a little bit about the customers that we've been working with and the challenges that we've faced. So a small slide about cloud perspective. As you'd imagine, we're a Informatica Cloud certified partner, and we've been involved or been influential in almost all of the major cloud MDM implementations worldwide with Informatica. We were lucky that right at the outset, when Cloud MDM was created, we were right there at the very start, and we worked alongside Informatica as the products come along, added new features and become greater. What we've done in the course of around about 30 implementations is create what we think is a robust and mature approach to implementing Cloud MDM. Of course, you always start a project with a project scope, and you also create a project plan. But what we've found with Cloud MDM, and I think Steve alluded to this before, is the most important thing about sorting out your data is understanding your data. So right at the very outset, before we actually install anything, what we want to try and understand is your data, and you should also try and understand your data if you're trying to implement Cloud MDM. Because as you saw from Steve's demonstration there, how Cloud MDM works is by matching up data. And if data's missing, if you don't have addresses in your org, then you probably won't have enough data to match up. You can't just do it on a name. So the very first thing that we do is understand the data within the customer's org. And then we've got this nice robust process going through where we try and enable the customer, but also get the initial deduplication done for the customer as we go through. So what we do is we do a data quality run through. We do actually have our own tool, which is data salvation, but other tools do exist. What you need to try and understand is sort of what percentage of the data is populated. And before you run Cloud MDM, which is a deduplication tool as well as its other features, just make sure that you've got enough information in there for your to be able to match. So we tend to go through quite a process. We analyse, we get a client review going, we look at what we can fix in terms of the data before we actually run the Cloud MDM processes, and we also configure Cloud MDM according to the customer's data. I think probably one of the biggest things people need to realise when they're doing this thing, particularly in the Salesforce environment, is that you are working with a contented environment, and for those administrators out there, you will know that governor limits exist within Salesforce. And one of the things you need to try and avoid is, if you've got very poor data, is hitting those governor limits through unnecessary processes with Cloud MDM. So again, I guess I'm dwelling on it a little bit, but understanding data, making sure that the data is in a good state before you run these sort of tools on it, we think is the best approach in order to get a successful outcome. So we believe that data quality, data analysis educates the implementer, educates the customer, and also informs the process. Yeah, so again, reiterating that, you should understand patterns of data within your application. The other thing you also need to do is look at how Cloud MDM works, and there's a special little device within Cloud MDM called the segment, which is used to limit the amount of records that are tested against each other. Typically, a segment is made up of a location, which could be a country ISO code, and is also made up of a company or person name. And that basically limits down the number of records that are checked against each other, and again, it improves the speed of the process and also avoids any governor limit type errors. So let's have a look at an example of one of our customers. So we've been working with Halligan in Canada, and we'll talk a little bit more about them and their aims a little bit later on. And what we did when we first analysed their data is that we noticed that they have 6 data sources, in fact 5 data sources, and when we actually analysed that data, we saw that some small number of records, but important records to them, so from SAP and from a couple of the other databases, were coming through without any addresses within the account field. Now, if you look at the sort of percentage size of the number of records that you've got there, compared to the IMS data that you can see there and the Salesforce data, it would be quite difficult to spot that number of records and missing that sort of address data. And you'd see a record with perhaps 80% complete data, which you'd feel comfortable to run Cloud MDM on. When we spoke to the customer about this, they informed us that from those sources, they generally take the address from the contact. That enabled us to enrich the addresses using ICS services, in this case, Informatica Cloud, and we were able to get great addresses across the entire org. And we did a very successful run of Cloud MDM in this situation. Cloud MDM examples and where we're currently working right now. In fact, yesterday they were here, but we're working with a Premier League British soccer club. And they have a particular problem with built-in duplication. So if you imagine a soccer club, they have season ticket holders and they have a database for that. They have regular ticket buyers and they have a database for that. And they also have a shop with a web front end, which people log into and log themselves in multiples of times. So they've got a real problem that they need to solve straight away. They've got duplication built into their systems. They're bringing it into a single Salesforce instance. And they need to deduplicate that. They've also been set the target by their CEO that when he looked at it himself within the Salesforce instance, there were 15 different versions of him within there. So they've got a month now to get that down so there's only one version, a single view of that particular customer. And it's a challenge. So we're working with them right now. They've got multiple sources. And we're working on Cloud MDM. The project's going great. We're going to get it done by the end of this month. But they did allow me to talk to you about a little bit about their problems here, but maybe some problems that you also share. The second sort of thing that we've got is we've now completed a project with Halligan in Canada. They're a multi-speciality healthcare type organisation, and what they've got is a slightly different problem. There are many different versions of Halligan in many different countries. So there's an Halligan Canada, Halligan US, Halligan UK, and so on. Halligan Canada are a early pioneer in a hub and spoke hybrid type application. So in their particular case, they have a central repository which is SAP, and they're going to have multiple Salesforce instances out in the various countries that they're in. What they want to do is maintain a golden record in the Salesforce part of their application. So what we've actually got here is a hub and spoke type thing where at the central repository they're running on-premise MDM from Informatica, and then out at in the various spokes of the hub they're running Cloud MDM within their Salesforce instances. So what they're doing is they're maintaining cleanliness, deduplication all the way down the line. And my final example here is Interactive Data, who we've been working with for some months now. They offer financial services. They have a new Salesforce implementation, and they're trying to bring together all of the data from all of the various sources they've got down to individual spreadsheets sat within their salespeople's computer systems. There are known data issues. We're fixing that. In fact, over the last few days, we've been going through a fairly manual activity with them where we've taken their information out of Salesforce into a flat file, so into a CSV file. They've got great city data, so we know that a customer is in New York, but they've got very poor country data, which we want to use for the segment which I described earlier. So what we've done is we've done a manual process which has taken a couple of hours to basically say, right, okay, if a customer is in New York, let's populate that with the country of the United States. And then we've then let Cloud MDM do the job that Steve showed, which was standardization of country, creation of ISO code, and so on. So what we've got here are 3 different customers with 3 different use cases, and we could go on. There are other use cases, particularly with hierarchies that Steve showed. We've done some very exciting projects in that sort of area, where we've seen hierarchies to 25,000 companies wide and 20 levels deep, and Cloud MDM can now support that sort of functionality. I don't know if you have any questions, Clive, or anything we can talk about.
I do actually, because I'm very interested. Are they all kind of the same sort of size, record count-wise, or some much larger than others?
Some of them are much larger than others. So we have customers with, I think, Interactive Data. We've got around about 75,000 accounts in there. We're dealing with some customers with 1.2, 1.3 million accounts in there. So, but they're very different in terms of size, and they're very different in terms of the challenge that sort of brings. So, no, I mean, we are seeing it across the sort of range. I mean, the Premier League team we're talking about there, for example, have around about 300,000 fans, some of them season ticket holders, some of them regular ticket buyers, and then a bunch of other people who they've just made contact with them, maybe bought a scarf for their grandson at the shop. So they are different challenges and different size customers.
So is there a typical kind of timeline for
Yeah, I mean, typically what we're seeing there's not an awful lot different in terms of the time that we're taking to actually enable customers to go forward on their own. So we see a typical project around about, from our perspective in terms of consulting, of 100 to 150 hours typically. And it elapsed time from starting off the project, doing the analysis, working within the sandbox environment to show the customer the functionality and giving them the confidence state of the production environment. We typically see a 4 to 6 week time frame of elapsed time. But of course there are some more complex projects. So we're working with a customer who's doing some big implementation in terms of the hierarchy part of the system, and that's taking longer to ensure that they get the functionality that they want out of there. But in terms of typical cleansing and deduping, we are seeing a bit of a standard really.
And presumably the end result is that they're all using some manual dedupe and data cleansing to a whole bunch of automatic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in every project, I mean, basically, if you understand Cloud MDM, and Steve showed you some of that, which was Cloud MDM uses a device called fuzzy matching within Salesforce. And fuzzy matching is a way of probabilistically looking at data and saying, right, working along through a process saying, right, okay, this is probably quite like this other piece of data, and it gives you a fuzzy output. Now, that really is just mathematics, and mathematics can go so far, and we'll get it right most of the time. But there is a data stewardship type process required where you say, okay, if the score drops below a certain level, and you saw the scores that Steve was showing in the fuzzy matching tab there, then perhaps we need to look at these records a little bit more closely. So we can automatically merge those that are above the line, and then below the line we perhaps need to have a data steward process which says, let's look at these, let's compare them manually, and for the bottom 5% we say, right, we'll make sure that we don't lose accounts by doing it the right way. So it's definitely something you need to have a method and a methodical approach about to get right.
And actually, your examples were a nice segue, because I know time's ticking. Were a nice segue. You mentioned that some of these, most of these examples used external data systems. So what happens if you're not doing all of your business reporting inside of Salesforce? I mean, what if you're using some other BI or analytics tool instead of the Salesforce reporting? Well, as you can see from this slide, Informatica has a full range of MDM capabilities to address your needs. So on the left, you can see Cloud MDM. It's a Force.com application specifically optimized for Salesforce. On the right, you see multi-domain MDM. And this is a generic MDM application that reconciles and masters multi-domain data across enterprise systems. Multi-domain is usually used and usually installed on-premise, but can also be hosted. And this brings us on to Universal MDM, when the two solutions are used together. Universal MDM helps to keep the two MDMs in sync and provides consistent customer and relationship data across Salesforce and enterprise systems to address multiple domains, operational and analytical requirements. Steve, thanks for a great demo. Martin, it's great to hear some experiences and feet on the street. One question we have here is actually about the sort of email validation. How are you doing anything? Actually, I'm going to address this to Martin. Are you doing anything, say, at the Premier League club or Halligan or Interactive Data, where they validate the emails, and what's your experience there?
I have my business partner here, Miranda, who's going to answer that question.
Thank you very much for dropping me in it. Hello. Well, yes, I mean, we have got some clients doing email validation, and there are a number of ways of going about it. I mean, you have got the contact validation service for Informatica Cloud. Certainly, Halligan have made the most of that. The Premier League Football Club, on the other hand, has an external contact validation type service that they're using, that they already had on-premise, and they're moving that data through that before loading their external data through. And of course you can put on various with Informatica Cloud Services, you can put in various regex and reg matches to ensure that you don't push bad data through.
Oh, okay, that's great. So it sounds that there's a number of options there, whatever suits the customer best, right? So that's great to hear. Steve, any advice on using Cloud MDM and multi-domain MDM together?
So it all depends on what it is you specifically want to share between the existing MDM systems. So there is, at the moment, you would not be able to share things like rules or the metadata of those rules between on-premise MDM and cloud MDM, just because there are completely separate architectures developed by different companies. But we are actually, that's part of our roadmap, and one of our intentions is to actually standardize some of those rule mappings across both architectures. On the other side of it, to actually get the two to talk to each other, it is 100% possible to actually move your master data from the cloud MDM systems, or from the beans and the master beans, down into an MDM hub, and actually have that data part of the central repository.
Now, I mean, we find in some of these larger implementations that more and more we're starting to use almost all of the products that Informatica Cloud sells. So typically in one of the implementations we've spoken about, and some of which we haven't, we would also use Informatica Cloud Services for two-way integration between the central repository and the Salesforce parts of their systems.
So I've got another quite nice question here, and it's almost a layup for Steve. Wondering where the Salesforce executes the match and the merge process. Does it require a separate MDM hub to connect in order to get the match results back?
So the actual execution all takes place within the force.com platform. We don't actually ever move any of your data out of Salesforce, so it's quite a straightforward product to get set up on in terms of infrastructure, because it actually gets installed into your existing Salesforce org. Because it is an Aloha app or Aloha certified app, that means that it doesn't take up any of your extra resources either. So you can actually have the whole product actually running within your org and not have to worry about data security issues or extra servers to manage for the implementation.
Great, thanks. I'm cognizant of the time, so last call for questions. In the meantime, my homework assignment is read our MDM best practice guide. There's a really nice white paper there. So informaticacloud.com/summer school guide will get you right there. Get social, tell a friend about Cloud MDM, so follow us on Twitter. And I'm going to do a promo for the final lesson in this series. We're going to work from the beach for the last one. We're going to see how we can use process and particularly wizards to mobilize Salesforce for the smartphone generation. I think the only thing for me to say really is to thank Cloud Perspective guys. We had a bonus. We had an extra one up here. Thank you, Miranda, and thank you, Martin. And Steve, thanks very much for doing the demo. And the last thing is to thank everybody and our students for turning up today, which was a really, really great webinar. So thanks, everybody. Thanks very much.